The $1,000,000 question: how do entrepreneurs transition from self-employed to owning a business that turns a profit? My name is Chris Waters, and this podcast has the $1,000,000 answer. Welcome to CEO Secrets. It's your host, Chris Waters of CEO Secrets. I'm extremely excited to have a guest on today that's got a really interesting insight into MLS associations across the United States. Denee Evans joins us. She is the CEO of the Council of Multiple Listing Services. Denee, welcome to the podcast.
Hi, Chris. Thanks so very much for having me, and I'm excited to join you.
So I've got to ask, you don't have a background as a real estate agent or in real estate, although you do. You're very familiar with the mortgage industry, and you've been a very distinguished executive through finance and technology through your career. What got you into this position of overseeing the Council of Multiple Listing Services?
My background is finance, so I loved helping people. Most people are afraid of finances. Numbers scare them. I worked in banking. People would come in with their checkbook registers back when we used to have those. You remember those? And my favorite was someone had a checkbook register where they logged the photos they took for their scrapbooking purposes. And so just helping people understand finances, how to use it for their benefit. And my favorite part was helping them be able to get ready for a home versus learning to save and setting up saving accounts versus my evolution or my career path going to working in the mortgage industry, helping them figure out how to finance the home. And then I made this very bizarre jump into the nonprofit world, which I would have never guessed. And that was sort of my transfer over into the where I am today. But
what nonprofit were you involved with?
So that was here. I'm based in Las Vegas, Nevada, and we were working on making homes more energy efficient. And as part of that, we worked when we were making homes more energy efficient here. We wanted to get that information into the multiple listing service so that it could be valued and communicated to the consumers, and the agents could know that that was an asset or a feature of the house. And so through that interaction, I met individuals in the multiple listing service here in Nevada, which then opened the doors that they said, hey, we have a job opening as the CEO of the Council of Multiple Listing Services. We think you should apply. And that was 6 years ago, which I love. Wow. I've been just absolutely love the people I get to work with, great people I get to meet, and still continuing doing what I love, helping people attain home ownership, just doing it from a completely different way than I would have ever imagined. Making that happen. So being open to possibilities, but still doing what I love doing.
What have been some of your greatest ahas and maybe things that have come from, struggles, frustrations, et cetera, since becoming CEO of the Council of Multiple Listing Services?
I would say how complicated our industry can be, just the process of buying and selling a home. I knew of those before, just on my side of working on the mortgage side or being in the banking side of helping all those process. And I think as we've been trying to work as an industry, and I've really been working obviously with multiple listing services to help improve the efficiencies of that and how we're better partners with brokers and agents to make that happen. How do we really give them the tools, empower them to be the very best at providing service to their customers? It's complicated and it's so different across all of the country. Real estate is local. That's one of the most basic rules. And so how do we help advance MLSs and help them to be the very best partners to their brokers and agents, but understanding that it is different in each of the local markets, because what you need there in Austin, it might be a little bit different than what we need here in Las Vegas due to just how it happens in each of those areas. So I think that's a little bit frustrating because there's just not a one size fits all solution, right? It's different.
So you've been in this role for 6 years, and so your timing is quite interesting because there's been a lot of hostility between the national real estate portals like Zillow, Realtor.com, et cetera, in terms of syndicating listing data, and I think in Las Vegas, actually, where you're based, if I remember correctly, recently they cut off the feed for a minute to, what was it, Zillow or Realtor.com?
I'm not remembering which one, but I do remember there was some stuff that happened around there, probably about a year ago, maybe a year and a half ago.
how have you been, helping other boards, other, MLSs across the country? How have you been helping them navigate kind of the, frustrations of brokerages, for example, that are very listing side heavy, and their listings get used as a marketing tool to generate leads and resold to another agent that has their face on that listing? What have you been doing to help the MLSs navigate that? And what have been y'all's thoughts on that?
The number one thing is the communication, because it goes back to the thing, what works in one place may not in another. It is so key about the communication. And one of my biggest things you'd mentioned, that happened in Las Vegas, but it has happened other places. And so it's about talking with your market. What is it that they want? Because while they thought maybe that what was needed or wanted, how are you really engaging with your community? And we've been really pushing our members. So CMLS, we are the trade association for MLSs. I don't think I mentioned that at the beginning. So we have about 200 and I think we're at about 220 MLSs. But those 220 MLSs make up about 85% of the market across the country. So it's all of your major MLSs. And it's about communicating with your members, right? Because some do want it and some don't. And if you don't have systems and processes set up to understand what is it that they want, and how you meet those needs, then that's where you get into the issues. So we can't do the one size fits all. It's just, we issue, you can't do that, or you must do this. You have to understand. And we've really been pushing and advocating for that open communication and engaging. But I think the piece is when you say the MLS, we have to understand the MLS is made up of agents and brokers. Those are the people that sit around the board tables that are making these decisions, that are trying to do what's in the best interest. And obviously things can go sideways, but to understand that if you can get involved, you can help share what it is you do or don't want as the member of that particular MLS. That's how we make this better. That's how we help you be better prepared to serve your clients, because that MLS does power a lot of those tools and help you, make that dream of home ownership happen. So I would ask that you get involved, and it makes me crazy when I hear the MLS. The MLS is us. It's agents and brokers. And yes, there's staff and there's leadership at MLS, but it really is the membership and the board of directors that is agents and brokers. So how can we really acknowledge what that is and make that process and that interaction, that communication loop better? And we've been trying to focus on that at CMLS.
So what you guys are trying to do is quite, it's like climbing Mount Everest, because as you're mentioning, there are so many different MLSs. Every real estate's local nature. Everybody's got a different opinion that, sits on the boards of these, MLSs. Everybody has a different opinion of what's right and wrong, and it's very fragmented, to say the least. So you guys are I think you're trying to climb Mount Everest. And
well, it's fragmented, and then you even have different ownership structures. You have different governance structures. So everything's slightly different. But I do want to stop and celebrate a little bit that where you said fragmented, but we have made significant progress. When I started 6 years ago, there was over 900 MLSs, and the last count was we're down to 550. So that is excellent progress in the way of working to make things more efficient for the agent and broker.
Let's talk about that for a minute. Do you ever see a time when there is just one centralized MLS for the entire United States, or potentially maybe just regional MLSs that cover much larger territories?
That is my favorite Brad Inman statement. We need the national MLS. He yelled at me once because I countered him on it. We don't need a national MLS. That scares the bejesus out of me. Who's going to run that? I think it was even mentioned one time that I would run it. I don't want that job, just to be clear. That would be awful. What we need is more efficient flow of data. We need to make sure that it can travel and get to who's supposed to be using it for the right purposes more efficiently. That's what we need. But I have to tell you, a lot of times that gets stopped because the people around the table, the boardrooms of the MLSs, don't necessarily always want that to happen, because sometimes that can open up doors to going into different markets, and there's sometimes fear of that.
So what you're referencing is, I'm assuming, MLS is having a really robust open API in order to push and pull data in and out of multiple systems to help.
I would say it's even before that, being willing to open and share. Mm-hmm. And a lot of times I will hear things, well, we voted on it and it didn't. My board doesn't want to do that. right? So it's if new people are coming in and not wanting to just really be, the consumer doesn't care where the borders are, right? The consumer wants to look and share and see wherever it is, which is why the consumers are going there to look. So how do we as an industry, as MLSs, as brokers and agents, help to foster that sharing of that information that makes it easier for the consumer to get what they want, but still keeping the broker and the agent as the expertise and that trusted advisor there to help them navigate the process, which is insanely complex, and they need that person. I'm a true 100% believer they need that person to help navigate, because it is, I've been part of the process on the mortgage side and the bank side. I get it. Personally, I bought and sold several houses, so I get the value.
Let's talk a little bit for a minute about on the data integration side. There was previously a company, I forgot, it was called Bridge something, and they were based out of Atlanta. They were acquired by Zillow, and they helped manage a lot of the integration needs for Zillow. And I'm curious, has CMLS, the association you're leading, have they looked at working with a agnostic data integration partner that for the MLSs and boards that are willing to help ease the frustration of getting accurate information between multiple systems, making it easier for brokers and agents, having a toggle between less systems, less data, double data entry. Have y'all looked at examined any companies that can help solve some of those issues on a national level that's agnostic?
That idea has been proposed to us that we should, but as being the trade association, the board has not had any serious discussions about that. But what is exciting is there has been a lot of MLSs. There's a lot of initiatives that MLSs are promoting to help foster that. So you can look at, there is the MLS Grid, which is a Midwestern effort. There is MLS Aligned. There is, I'm forgetting the acronym for it, but John Mosey has something that's working on as well that is more the open API. There is, I know there's more that I'm forgetting, because I had a sheet and I just got organized the other day and filed things away. I could have that list out. But there is a lot of initiatives where MLSs are really taking that to heart and working very hard to help facilitate and make that happen. So no, it's not sitting at CMLS, but I'm very proud to say that our members are the ones that are help advancing that and working very hard to do that. And that does take boards at different organizations voting to get onto that and agree to work on that, and having to change, like one of them, it's one licensing agreement, that you don't have to, if you're working in multiple markets, you don't have to have multiple license agreements. So there's a really big push, and that's just in the last couple of years that's been doing, and we've made a lot of progress. So I'm very proud to say that those are CMLS members.
What are you excited about from a technological perspective, just advancements, relatively speaking, to the industry? What's something you're excited about that's coming down the pipe?
I would say one of the really exciting things that we just saw over the last couple of weeks with, obviously in quarantine and with the pandemic, just the craziness from all that. But what we saw is the industry rally around still facilitating the marketplace, right? We still were able to have houses, people still had a need to buy and sell houses. And the way that MLSs were working to get virtual open houses done, the video feeds in, all of that stuff, how quickly we were able to do that. And I said a couple weeks ago that like we just evolved in like 2 months what would have taken us several years to do in the way of adopting this technology and figuring out a way to get it into the MLS and getting adoption by the users, which is the really exciting part. I mean, you go look now, most houses have virtual walkthroughs or the virtual open house options or the live open houses, and we're getting all that language down of what those different things are, but just how quickly the industry rallied to make that happen. How much we resisted change before. I mean, that was, you talk to any MLS exec, if they're like implementing any change, they're like, oh, wish me luck. This is going to be tough. And so we just experienced a time where everyone's like, we got to change now. And everybody jumped on board and made it happen so that the consumer could still get the information they needed. And it was amazing. And we just did some really cool stuff quickly. And I would say, I think if anybody isn't, between MLS, organizations themselves, the agents, the brokers, if people aren't just absolutely wrapping their arms around how we experience homes digitally. And I say, take that away from data points to digitally. Like you just got to go all in on that. I already had it on my whiteboard over here of how we look at houses and experience them not as 3-bedroom, 2-bath, 1,900 square foot in 89012 zip code. It's open concept, close to my kid's school, and just it's more of a look and feel. And we just jumped to make that happen. People can experience that now, and we did it in 2 months. And so I think that's really cool, but we gotta keep working on that, because that demand and that expectation from the consumer is just going to continue.
So speaking of the digital experience and just, adding to the convenience factor for consumers, something that Opendoor and Zillow have rolled out nationally is a Tour It Now app, where the consumer can use the app to open up a lockbox to go into Zillow-owned homes, and then Opendoor has something similar. I think most real estate agents across the country are using the GE Supra lockboxes, which are controlled by your phone. Do you have any thoughts on some kind of national app or tool, if you will, that would enable agents to, set their listings up for a Tour It Now type of experience for consumers?
Yes, I totally believe that. I have a keypad on my house right now that I set up a year ago. I think it was even longer than that if anybody's coming to the house, whether it be the babysitter is coming by or my sister needs to stop by and pick something up, and she just has her own code. I can reset it anytime. It is so convenient. And I visited an MLS last week. I had to take a short road trip because I'm not ready to get on an airplane yet. I had to take a short road trip, and I went and saw one of the MLSs, and he took me to the back storage room where they had boxes of a key box. And I said, how long before that does go away? I don't know the timing, but I do think of even just consumer behavior already of having the keypads on. I already have it on. Does it just become something common? I would say yes. I just don't know the time frame of when that changes.
Mm-hmm. There's also the whole, dilemma of, figuring out cameras so you can monitor people leaving and going and making sure things get locked up and whatnot. So,
which we can lock the house now if they leave. And I do have cameras in the house that I can see. They're not upstairs, but I do have the downstairs camera. So
if you were a listing agent, for example, though, you may need to provide the cameras, right, when you set up a lockbox that someone could access as a consumer.
There's all kinds of legal sides to that, I think, and the unintended consequences that we have to think through as an industry, and be really smart about that for sure. But even going back to the photo pieces, one of the things I've been talking about before this was when we talk about the look and feel of the homes and getting more photos, but thinking about eventually is data for a home actually it's scraped from the photos, right? So we talk about data scraping where it used to be numbers, but now they're scraping data. And a lot of these home valuations are coming where they're taking it and making them better because their photos augment the data to say really what the value is. Like if I read one article, if it's a pink home, it adjusts it. It can read it from the photo and it adjusts it down because it's a pink home and it realizes that it's not. So, even thinking about who really does own not just the photo itself, but like the data in the photo. Who owns the data in the photo? And we haven't even started talking about that, but people are using it. They're scraping the data out of it. And it's just a whole different level of information that, like you said, the cameras in the house and the door locks, and there's some liabilities and some things we'll have to talk about, but I think that evolution and that convenience factor, I think we're on that path, and we have to talk about those things and make sure we're keeping the consumer in mind and also the liability and responsibility of the professionals.
What do you think is the single biggest weakness and struggle for each MLS across the country? Like if you could I don't know, just pinpoint one thing that keeps you up at night that you're just worried about for anyone, or maybe all of them, all the MLSs.
Yeah. I think it's this balance between everyone wants MLS data because it's the gold star standard of data. It's got everything in it, and MLS has worked so hard to make sure that it is the most credible, accurate, timely, reliable data about the housing market. Right? I think I'd read on your website, even you described it as this knowledge-rich database of information. Mm-hmm. So MLSs have to balance that and make sure that we're still doing that job, which sometimes probably irritates people. But it's a very important job that we have to do. It's like, I love the police when they're there to protect. And then when I get a speeding ticket or, then there's that other side of it. But we have to balance that with the innovation. We have to balance that with fostering the growth and the evolution of technology. And the challenge there is it's going so quickly right now. Innovation and technology changing exponentially right now, and keeping up with that and being able to support the tools and the innovation of, everyone says the kid in their garage making up the newest and best thing, and how we can foster that and give that tool to the agent so that they provide the very best service to their customers. Balancing being able to do that with still keeping the gold star standard of data. It's a tricky line. I think it's really hard for MLS executives to balance that. And so I've really been pushing that at CMLS, that how do we foster innovation and maintain gold star standard of data? Because
do you think it's also maybe the fear that people don't want to share the data, which is, slowing down innovation?
I don't know so much if it's they don't want to share the data. I think it's when the data gets misused. The community contributing to the data, right? And so people who are asking to use it that aren't the ones that are supposed to use it, right? So when it gets taken by, there was one gentleman from an outside entity, he's like, well, you should just open it up and it should be available to everybody. And I'm like, but you have all these hardworking brokers and agents who are the ones creating this database, and you think that it should just be given away to everybody. I can't buy into that. That doesn't make sense to me. Then why not just go to Craigslist for their database, right? Like, go there, ask them.
Yeah.
Like somewhere there has to be some rules and some guidelines and how it's used and why it's used and that it's used appropriately. And that's where I say that line is, how do we foster innovation? Because we want people to make really cool tools that make it easier for consumers to buy and sell houses and to find their dream home. And that's where that balance comes from of how we do that. But we can't just open it up and make it available to all, because then I think the community of these hardworking individuals that create that database, that put it in there, what's the value of that?
Yeah. Okay, we're going to move on to another subject, okay? And this is going to be a little bit of a lightning round, and you have to promise me you're not going to get all political on me.
I'll try my best.
So, and just for clarity for people watching this, you're not associated with any real estate brokerage. You are a part of an association that oversees MLSs all across the country that have brokerages of every different brand imaginable and work with every single different type of technology company. So I just want to set the stage for that before I fire away with these questions.
I have never had a real estate license.
Yep. So so as a consumer in real estate, what real estate company are you very bullish on? What's like a real estate brokerage company brand that, as a quasi outsider, if you will, that you feel like is best set up for exponential growth over the next 10 years? And you can only name one.
Okay.
I know, which makes it real difficult.
So my background is finance. So I'm not necessarily going to go with a brokerage. So I'm sorry that I'm not going to answer that question other than to say I'm a very big believer in the one that adopts how the finance model happens differently. For so long, there has been one box in order to purchase a home. You had to go through a set of guidelines in order to finance a house. And the way that the way our whole industry works is wrapped around this one set of rules in order to get a house financed. Mm-hmm. And I think right now it is so, there's so much activity of how you can finance houses differently. There's so much VC money going into changing how we think about a house being financed differently, whether it be, I use the word fractional ownership, but I don't like that because I don't think it really conveys how the change is happening. But I've done lots of whiteboarding on this.
Use of blockchain technology and...
Nope. I would say it's been just government-backed guidelines, Freddie, Fannie, requirements, GSEs of how and what a mortgage loan looks like. And I think we will see a different set of guidelines of how you can finance, almost like crowdfunding type models that become more normal and more consistent. Brad Inman did at an event, I want to say 2 summers ago. Everybody had to make their prediction of what would be the biggest impact in real estate, and he put it in a time capsule and he's buried it somewhere. And mine on there was, when the cash flow changes of how to buy a house, that will be our biggest disruptor, because everything that happens today in our industry and what makes it so complicated is all the hoops we jump through to finance a house. And that comes from my background of my degree is in finance. I worked in the mortgage market. I worked in banking. All of those things are wrapped around it. And if we can disrupt what that looks like and that entire process, and I'm just seeing more of it, Divvy Homes with the rent to lease model, rent to own, but it's not your traditional. They're just different. Unison, which mailed me an offer of like they'll do shared equity growth, but you can use it on a purchase. And I've just been researching more of these. They're different than what we knew in the past. I just think there's a lot more. They don't scare me like they used to. And I think that there's different rules being applied to those. So I think whoever can really grab those.
When I asked the question of which brokerage, is best set up for success for the next 10 years, I think your broad answer was whoever adopts the latest innovative technologies. Is there anybody that comes to mind? Is there any brokerage you're seeing on the outside that you're really impressed with on the technology front from a national perspective?
I guess I would say I wasn't even I don't get into the technology necessarily of a broker. Mm-hmm. I talk with them and I see the different things. So I don't even know that I'd be equipped to say that. And I'm trying not to get out of the answer. It's not the space that I operate in. I couldn't even tell you that I've seen platforms of them. So I would say overall, I think it's the company that does the most to act as the consultant and like the trusted advisor to the consumer. It is less about just a transaction and really looking at the asset, the real estate asset, as part of their overall financial life and how they're using that to grow their asset. And it's part of their portfolio. So I would say whichever company is really positioning and looking at that it is. I was a financial planner for a while, finance background, investments. And if you're looking at helping people really overall their financial life, and the house is their biggest financial asset, that's what I would say is your biggest. And the other piece I'll add, I actually did my my presentation. CMLS has an annual conference each year. We have about 800 people, which we're not doing this year. We're doing it digitally. So that'll be a venture. But last year I did actually speak a little bit in my opening remarks about the brokerage that also I think, and what I was seeing from a lot of CEOs that I would hear speak, is when you're starting to not only, where I said track the asset as part of the financial portfolio of your customer, but also they're starting to track how the asset is cared for. So like really tracking when does it need the AC replacement and the maintenance of the asset, right? So kind
of like a concierge service.
Yeah. So overall, you're just the go-to for that person, but not sending the thing of like change your air filters and the batteries in your fire alarm, the smoke alarm. But
it's more like a proactive service that just does it for people.
Yeah.
And you charge like a monthly fee, like a home warranty.
Because you're maintaining the asset. Yeah, you're maintaining the asset because it is the biggest asset in their portfolio. Mm-hmm. Right. So you're really looking at it as not only do you have a 401k and you have your regular investments and your savings and the real estate asset in there, and tracking how it's performing and part of your overall just financial strategy.
So I have the same question for you regarding who's set up the best over the next 10 years to achieve, exponential growth, but more specifically in the technology category, like what tech companies out there that are servicing the real estate industry across mortgage, title, brokerage. Is there any one specific company where you're just incredibly impressed with what they're doing to push the industry to greater heights and innovation? Any one company, technology related, that you're very bullish on?
This has been a debated topic. I've heard over the industry of whether like they're agent focused or they're consumer focused. Mm-hmm. And why I don't have a specific company, I would say that it's whoever is still really focused on the consumer. And when I started at CMLS 6 years ago, I'd come in and I would ask, okay, well, what about the consumer? And I would get like, shh, MLSs don't talk about or work with consumers. Like, you can't say that word. Mm-hmm. I was like, what? Like we have to think about the consumer. They're the end customer. And even though we may or may not interact with them directly, they're still our customer's customer. So we have to think about it and talk about them. So I think if we can really all, if we're looking and evaluating things that make sure that consumer is our North Star and that we're working to make it easier for them to find their dream home, to sell their house and make it easy and simple, that is the ones that will be successful. And that just has to be the focus. Make it simple. Make it simple. I just want simple. I'm wife, mom, 2 kids, running a company. Just make my life simple and simple, consumer focused, efficiencies. I'm willing to pay more. I just need you to make it simple for me because I don't have time. And
do you own any stock in any real estate related publicly traded companies? Given your financial planning background, I'm sure you own stock. Do you own any publicly traded companies in the real estate category?
Not specifically. Most of my stuff would be in funds. So there's
index funds and things like that.
And I have told my advisor of like, hey, they don't put me in any weird spots. And so yeah, I've given that direction, but I'm sure there's some in some funds, but nothing directly that I have any control over. So.
Got it. Cool. So I've got one final question for you before we sign out for the day. So this is the final question of the show today. As a CEO, what has been your greatest aha over the last 6 years in your role? Something that you could share that you feel like it's like, something you feel like internally was like something you should have been told earlier on in your career as a CEO that you could, share with people that are aspiring leaders or they're currently CEOs of organizations. What's been the greatest secret you've uncovered to be a great leader of an organization like CLMS?
It's CMLS. I just at least have to do that one. Council of Multiple Listing Services. I would say, I would probably say 2 things on that is, one, I think you have to acknowledge that when you are a CEO of a leader, sometimes it can get a little bit lonely because you're carrying a lot of the weight, right? As you're responsible for the success of that organization, you're responsible for the financials of that organization. Being a trade association, you have both a board of directors, you have employees, you have your community, and as an industry, I feel responsible for really helping to make the multiple listing service better, that better supports agents and brokers to be successful. So I think finding a really great support group, whether that's in the industry or out, that you can just have sharing and saying almost cheerleaders, confidants, whatever, somebody that you can just call and be like, hey, I just need a little pick me up, cheer me up, something like that, to understand that it's a lot. It can get very overwhelming, and it's okay to acknowledge that and understand that it's a lot of responsibility, but you have a lot of great opportunity too.
Would that be in the form of, for example, a mastermind or a peer group, something like that?
I have done those, and those are excellent, but these are just sometimes I'll text somebody and I'll just say, hey, I just need 15 minutes. Can you just give me 15 minutes? I just need to blah and tell me it's going to be okay. Right. And that doesn't necessarily need to be my husband or, a best friend, but it's just somebody who a lot of times there may be other CEOs or something that can kind of relate to the craziness that happens. So I would say making sure you have that peer group. People will tell you that it's going to be okay, and just understand that it does get a little bit lonely. And when I can start acknowledging that, then that helps. So those trusted advisors and those cheerleaders. And then the other thing I think is just really empowering people. One of my favorite things to do, I think, one of my big aha moments was when a class I did actually at CMLS. We offer CMLX 3, which is our leadership course. But one of the instructors said the quadrant dividing into 4s. And it was this section where you were consciously competent about what you did and what you did really well. And then the opposite was you had no idea what you did really poorly and you want to realize what you're not good at. So I've tried to become very consciously competent and understand what I'm good at, but then also consciously understanding what I'm not good at, and building my team around and acknowledging what I'm not good at, and empowering the people around me to they'll come to me and they might ask a question, and I say, are you looking for me to make the decision on this? Because I think you are totally, like, I hired you to do this and I trust your abilities over mine even to do this thing. So do you need a sounding board? Do you just want me to make the decision because it's just too much? Like, tell me, how do I help you? And really empower and help people find their conscious competence, right? Like, help them find what it is that they do best, encourage them, grow them, promote them, encourage them to do what it is that they're awesome at. But I think in order to do that, I had to get really clear about do my own SWOT analysis, right?
Yeah.
What is it that I'm awesome at? Really acknowledge what I'm not and own that. I'm a finance girl. Give me spreadsheets, give me numbers. They add up. They make sense. Dear Lord, please don't make me write things because I can do it, but it is not pleasant. It is a little bit rough. So and I fess to it, but I can get through it, but it is a challenge. So those would be my two things. Get your support group, acknowledge that it can be really, really overwhelming, but get your group set up to cheer you on, and then build yourself a great team that fills in where you're not great, and acknowledge it, own it.
Denee Evans, thank you so much for being on the podcast, the CEO of CMLS. I really appreciate your time today. You've shared a lot of really insightful information, and I know that you're serving in a role that is incredibly impactful into the future of real estate, specific to the MLS component of it, and can probably speak for all the agents and brokers out there. We're all incredibly appreciative of everything you've done to help align the MLSs across the country. And so thank you again for everything you're doing to help better our industry. And thank you for being on CEO Secrets today.
Thank you for having me, Chris. And I would just ask anybody who's interested and wants to get involved in their local MLSs, whether it's officially or just involved in the conversation, please do so. It helps all of us move forward. So thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Yes, thank you. Guys, thanks for tuning in to this episode of CEO Secrets. You can watch this on YouTube or subscribe on iTunes. And catch us on the next episode. Bye, everybody.
Bye. Thanks.